Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
I'm so excited today to be talking about one of the issues that can really affect us this time of year as we round out the last 2 months of the year. And in the US, those 2 months tend to be filled with holidays. And especially for women in medicine, anything extra, even though the holidays can be a really cheerful time, there are so many factors that can actually make it more of a struggle. And I would like to welcome Dr. Joanne Sotelo today because she's going to be talking to us about some ways maybe that we can look even more forward to the holidays instead of feeling a little bit of a pit in our stomach about, oh no, here they come again. Joanne, I would love to hear about why is it so important, especially as we think about family time leading into this holiday season? Why is it so important to pay attention to this time of year?
This time of the year, no fault. This is a topic of conversation I get asked about so often, not just with my psychiatry patients, but then also with the physicians I coach. And it seems like it should be straightforward. Like it's the holidays, we're supposed to be in a good mood, we're going to see family. We are supposed to, and I'll have like air quotes, be just fine with it. And it is a challenge for a lot of people. So if this is something that you struggle with, don't feel bad. There's a lot of people who do as well. And then we have this external expectation of how we're supposed to show up. And it is not uncommon. Again, we've talked about this in one of the last episodes of this time of the year, things start to pile up. The expectations pile up. That sense of responsibility for some of us as physicians, we get a little bit busier. And it's again, I think it's one of those things that we don't give ourselves permission to talk about. And then also you might be seeing family members that you haven't seen in a while. And maybe some are not your favorite people, right? And we're not supposed to be saying those things out loud, but it creates so much anticipation and stress, and we don't need to ignore it. We just need to think about it ahead of time and get prepared. I don't know what you've heard from some of the people that you help in this sense of the end of the year and the families and all of that.
And as you said, oftentimes there can be some anticipated joy and expectations. And yet, a lot of times we're combining. Sometimes there's a lot of families staying with you or in town. You're going to be seeing have a lot bigger dose of them. And I know as I was thinking about topics that are really pertinent this time of year, that can be really stressful. Or maybe the last time you were together with that person, there was a painful interaction that maybe hasn't been resolved. And I love how you talked about that getting prepared. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this with you today, Joanne, is because you can help us get better prepared with both your coaching and your psychiatry hat. And I just wonder also, why is it so important for women in medicine to be prepared for this maybe busier season at work as well as busier family season?
Yes. And as women physicians, we already have to balance so many roles. So that's one of the big things is us feeling that the expectations are high, not just at work, but then also that kind of double shift that we talk about of coming home and taking care of all the families, the extended family, the kids, the gifts, the food, all the things. And it's not just physical labor, but it's also that mental and emotional drain. So that is something that we have to pay attention to because, like we've talked in this podcast before, we are already at a higher risk for depression, anxiety, and burnout. So we have to be very careful to what we're adding to our plate, especially the things that we can control. We talk also about how we feel that we have limited time and energy. So we have to be very mindful of what we choose to add to the plate and learn to pick and choose. Like we don't have to say yes to all the things. And the other thing that we, might be a little bit more difficult to talk about out loud without raising some eyebrows is that there are gender differences and cultural norms that also play a part into this. As a Puerto Rican, like when family comes, there's you pick them up at the airport. Like I have friends who say, just send an Uber. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, I cannot just send an Uber to my family member who's in the airport. And then, the expectations of, what you're going to serve and that you're going to, meet their little quirks and all of that. And I do it from my heart. But, it's another added layer. And with that, then the other side of the coin is also kind of our sense of perfectionism or even the guilt that can come up. So all of those things then define us as women physicians, that doctor programming that can be very helpful in some areas of our lives can get really loud at this time of the year. So we have to be particularly mindful more than at other times. Plus, we want to be present. We want to enjoy it. This is not, a time where it's just more to do. It's not a crisis. It needs to be also thinking about our presence, our energy, our joy, the connections that we make, making it very meaningful.
I love that comment of our programming. And as women in medicine, we did go through programming in our training. We were programmed not to have boundaries, to be somewhat perfectionistic. And this theme of allowing that programming to serve us when it's appropriate, like at the office or with really precise needs at your work. And can we recognize the times where it's not serving us and allow that to relax? For example, would it kill you to allow the Uber to take your family members from the airport? And when you think about the time and energy and resources that might be taking from elsewhere, can we get better about saying, I'm going to give it my A+ in these 3 areas during these busy holiday months? Where are you going to make the most impact? And I'm going to back off on that need to be so precise, to be so good in these other areas, because there's that point of limiting returns, where if you gave your all to all of those things, you're really going to be stealing your best from even the most important areas, like being fully present, as you said, or maybe fully enjoying the holidays, just like everyone else, especially if you tend to be the host of those gatherings.
And it's so funny because I'm here listening to you and we prepared for this podcast. And then my brain goes to, oh my goodness, Thanksgiving is around the corner. Who's coming? What am I going to cook? Who's going to help me? But that speaks to our programming and how our brain goes, and that the awareness to know that is our default thinking and that it's okay, and that we can still pause and slow down and say, what do I really want to do? Like you're saying, what are some places where I can give it my best, and what are some places where I can let go of? But I started feeling it, like I already started feeling a little bit anxious, like, oh my goodness, it's around the corner.
And yet I hear you using that term that we both love, curiosity. I wonder what would happen if I relaxed a little bit in these areas. I wonder what would happen if I sought to get some extra help during this season. What could that look like, so that your anxiety, if you feel your anxiety going up thinking about it, I would say that's a warning to yourself that you tend to overcommit during those times. And I would like to challenge you, our listener, in thinking, oh, okay, can you get curious and say, I wonder what it would look like if I got this extra help. I wonder what it would look like if I chose to buy a fruit pie instead of make one or something like that. Coming from the person that is always in charge of having fruit pie for our holiday dinners, but I make them in the summer, so it's an easier task. But we digress. And so I'm wondering, Joanne, as we're talking about some of those ideas, we're alluding to a little bit of that and why it's so important, especially for women in medicine, to pay attention to what's going on this time of year. And why is this time of year so important and how things can tend to get busier in all aspects, work and home. You've always got some great strategies for us. What are some ways that we can be intentional about how we go into this busy season?
One of the most important strategies that we can think of for this season are boundaries. We need to be very aware of what are our internal boundaries as well as those external boundaries that we have to communicate out loud very clearly. Boundaries are going to save us in this time of the year and actually at any time of the year, but particularly because it's back to back, maybe more people than usual, maybe extended periods of times. And you need to decide ahead of time, what am I going to be available for concretely? And then also in terms of your mental and emotional energy. And the importance of connecting with how you want to show up and knowing what are some of the things that you need to do. I have one of the clients I coach. We were talking about this recently because her family, it's like that. Like they travel and they get together and it's a whole weekend. It's not just arrive the day, but it's activities the whole weekend. And she can sense the tension building. And one of her boundaries is saying, I don't have to stay in conversations I don't want to be a part of. And sometimes she can choose to kind of say something. And sometimes she just stands up and then say, I'm going to go check on the kids. I'm going to go clean. I'm going to go help set for dinner. So it's a subtle internal boundary. So you don't always have to say it out loud. And I'll give a little tangent here because at the time of this recording in the US, it's also elections. We're not going to talk about politics, but that might be a very hot topic at the Thanksgiving table. And you get to choose how you want to show up, how much you want to talk about it. But boundaries is going to be the most important thing, especially for this holiday season.
I love that. So setting boundaries and excusing yourself from places that you are not going to be comfortable staying in. What other suggestions or strategies might help us get through this season more successfully?
The other thing is also managing expectations. Ahead of time, you can decide, and I love these questions. What is your desired outcome? How do you want to feel in this situation? And what do you want to focus on? And these are such important questions. And this is true for any situation that you're going to be at. Because if you think of what is my desired outcome? I want to see family I haven't seen in a while. I want to leave a legacy. This is good for my kids. Having that in mind can help you go through those difficult conversations or that family member who's always gets you in a bad mood or, without giving too many details, but those things that can get in the way. And then if you start feeling that your emotion changes, if you connect with how do I want to feel, and then focus on that so that you can think of what do I need to focus on so that I remind myself of how I want to feel. That can change everything. And it's not going from being angry to peace and love, but I always say, even if you just change your emotion a little bit towards the emotion that you want to feel, it'll help you be grounded, it'll help you be more present, and it'll save your mental and emotional energy.
That is so powerful, Joanne. And we've talked about this quite a bit before, where we can create our own reality. And if you're like, oh, it's the holidays coming, and you have that sense of dread, then that challenge to ask, what are you thinking to create that sense of dread? And is there another way that you can think about the holidays that can shift that dread into something that will serve you better? Because most of us are not going to show up as our best with dread. And you really shared how important it is to bring that intention and to know ahead of time, how do I want this to turn out? How do I want to be? And then reverse engineering it. What do you need to do and what do you need to think to show up that way? Another point I want to bring up, Joanne, and maybe you have some thoughts around this, is the power of reflection. For example, I remember coaching one of my clients and they said, we had the most amazing vacation. And for that, family vacations were fraught with chaos and emotional drama. They were not enjoyable. And they kept repeating the same process. And I said, well, let's pause right there. You said you just had a great vacation. I want you to reflect on that and write down, what was it about this vacation? We're not very good at that in medicine. Write down what helped you make it go well. Mm-hmm. And so you could think about your last holidays, last family gatherings. Did it go really well? And if so, what made it go really well? Repeat that process. And if it didn't go as planned, can you jot that down and ask yourself, what do you have under your control? How can you communicate differently? How can you bring the intention so that you can intentionally create circumstances that are much more likely to have the outcome you want, instead of leaving it to random chance, which we wouldn't do with patient care? Think about how intentional we are with patient care. And yet I find so often with our own personal lives, we leave our outcomes, if we don't have a vision of what we want it to look like, to random chance.
And if we think of, I know this sounds cheesy, but if we think of what's the intention of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, and that we want to celebrate, we want to get together, we want to be grateful, we want to set intentions for the new year. And that is something that has helped me too, in then saying, what is it that we're here for? And something else I wanted to add, we were talking about this in one of our last episodes, and you mentioned this, Erin, was being prepared ahead of time and not just have the extra food or the plates. It's how do you recharge your mental, emotional, and physical energy so that you have almost like that backup battery that you can plug in case something happens and you're drained, or, if too many hours in a row with a lot of people makes you anxious. And that's something that can be very helpful. And I'll add a tangent here also, maybe not a popular opinion, but be careful also if you know that if you're very hungry and you get cranky, that's one thing. And the unpopular thing that I want to say is, if you know, then when you drink a lot, you get disinhibited, and maybe that gets you in trouble, and you look back at previous holidays and that was the common denominator. Only if you want to. Be mindful of that as well. How do you set yourself up to have the best time? And if that's not an issue, we're not here. No, there's no judgment. I just want to add that because it's something that I always say. I get interviewed on the holiday blues and how to deal with families almost every year from a psychiatric standpoint. And I always say that let's be mindful of the things that get in our way in terms of our judgment and our reactions and our mood.
And the two of us have such a deep understanding about coping mechanisms and about trauma. And sometimes we choose those things that are going to, in the short term, maybe make us feel better. And for some people, that might be alcohol. Other people, that might be sugary foods or comfort foods. And yet, as you're saying, when we ask ourselves, is this, even if it makes me feel good in the moment, how am I going to feel later on? Is this going to make me feel groggy? If I stay up late talking with my relatives until 2 a.m. and I got to get up and make everybody breakfast, how is that going to serve me? So really bringing that intention. How do you want your outcome to be? Look at your past performance and really be mindful of what, I was talking about this recipe. What recipe are you going to put in the mix versus what recipe do you need to have the best outcomes. And sometimes one poor choice, like adding, 2 tablespoons of salt instead of 2 teaspoons of salt to a recipe, overdoing it in one area or leaving something completely out, can really spoil the whole mood or atmosphere. So just being mindful of that. How do you want it to come out? And then let's be intentional about adding that up. So I'm going to do a quick review here, Joanne. What I heard you say is that this is an important time. We've got lots of variables going on. And for many physicians, their lives get even busier, even before you add the holidays to your plate. And our plates are already so full. Women physicians sometimes allow our programming to get in our way. And sometimes that strength can become a weakness when it comes to family gatherings. I heard you talk about strategies, setting clear and healthy boundaries for yourself, and bringing intention to how you want the outcome to show up, and also managing expectations. And we talk a lot about perfectionism and how that can sometimes get in the way of having unreasonable expectations. So powerful. Is there something else you think it's really important for us to remember as these holidays, no matter what we celebrate or where we will be? What other thing would be helpful for us to think about as we get ready for this busy holiday season, Joanne?
I was thinking of a medical student I was working with recently, and I was telling him that this is something that we know per research, that if you get your patients involved in their treatment plan, that it's more likely that they will adhere to the treatment and they'll understand it and they'll feel more involved. And that's true also when you are creating changes, involve your team and give them a sense of accountability, and that'll make you more successful. And thinking about that, this is true as well with our family. If we have some concerns, if we want to plan ahead, let's get them involved. You can communicate some of your concerns, and then you can also plan better ahead of time. And you can say, last year this happened. How can we make it better? Or let's start a new tradition. Let's try this instead of this other thing. And that by itself will help with open communications no matter what, and might allow you all to have a better time and get back to what's important, which is family and love and connection and setting ourselves up for a beautiful new year.
I love that. Such a powerful message, Joanne. And on that note, if you find the messages that we're sharing on this podcast powerful to you, you think that these messages would be helpful to get in front of more women in medicine, something you can do for us, I know we've asked it before, would be just taking a moment. It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes to find that area where you can rate the show and give it how many stars you'd like to see. And that's going to help get us in front of more people so we can share these powerful messages and maybe bring some hope as we enter this busy season. We will see you on the next episode.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.